Good day, good day. Today is another episode on May 18th, 2021 of the QuogglingSand podcast. It has been too long. It has been too long since I've done this and my other fledgling podcast, the FFS Talk podcast. I know I spoke initially of doing sprints and getting things done. And I have been getting some things done, but I suffer from the analysis paralysis problem that most engineers do. You get wrapped up in thinking, planning, what-ifing, and you wonder where the day went. Then you wonder where the week went. Anyway, thank you for listening to yet another stab at describing what's going on, what I'm working on, asking you what you're working on, etc. First of all, Zencastr. Have you ever used it? Not a fan. Not a fan. They have a lot of problems. First of all, it does work. I'm being extremely critical. So you get something that's like 90% there, that 10% suddenly becomes 100% of the problem, and now I'm being super critical. So let me start over. Zencastr does work, but until it doesn't. Network outage will be your undoing if you are mid-recording. And one of the features they tout is the ability to recover if a connection is lost. So local client recording, the recordings are supposedly automatically managed. And I hope by the time you're listening to this, either in May of 2021 or sometime in the future, that this has been addressed. But essentially, if the connection is dropped, it's difficult to tell for the other people because sound will simply go away. So that is to say, if I'm hosting a recording, the session is, I'm the owner, I guess. I've invited guests to participate. I can see that the guest goes offline if my connection drops. So right away, it looks like I'm still online, but I'm not. So the UI should reflect the fact that the connection is down for me and that their status is actually unknown. The guest should see that I am offline, but instead you end up with hello, and which is not funny, but it's comical, I suppose. Like why is there not better status indicators? And also they have a bouncy sine wave display, time domain display of the signal, the audio signal, so you get to see your voice bouncing up and down. There's no loudness measurement, so I'd like to see like a VU style meter or something that says, yeah, all the guests are at about the same level. Do a test 1, 2, 3. Because at the end, it's hard. The human ear is tricky. We don't know if we're 3 dB up or down, or who knows, right? So time domain signal display is fun, but not useful. Anyway, so when my connection went down, actually it was about 10 minutes in on the most recent episode of Hugo Floss, which is a podcast I do with my mom. And before you say anything, my mom's been a podcaster for 3 or 4 years. So, and I had been a podcaster before that. So we have microphones and recording stuff, and we're good. She's in Phoenix, I'm in Vegas. So every Sunday morning we do an hour sort of what's going on. We're working on at least one project called Casa Nunzia. So it's nice to kind of discuss that as we're getting it running and all that stuff. So anyway, the connection goes down 10 minutes in. We basically resort to Telegram chat to, hey, what's going on? Or, okay, it's up, but now it's down again. We'll start over at noon. So the share collaboration environment is tricky right off the bat if a connection goes down, especially the host. So then, since we just gave up, we threw out the 10 minutes of 10 minutes of actual conversation plus however another 20 minutes of hello. We started over. The first time this happened, then my connection was down for a few minutes. And so it came back up, and sync error on the cable modem. So not a maintenance or field down. It was just whatever, sync loss. Connection's back up where we continue the podcast recording. Now, the upload, the resynchronization of the Zencastr cloud service view of the audio recording session from the two guests, myself and my mom, and each of our individual client side, the view of that data was out of sync. So you would hope that one of those features, being able to recover from a connection drop, would come into play. And it sort of did when you visit your session URL /recover. And at that point, it will try to recover. Where do you find that information? Oh, it's in one of their support documents. It's not part of the integral user experience. So here's a feature we have. We're going to hide how to do it. And good luck when you actually need to use it, because then it was a little wonky. So all kinds of files. I'm just a mess. I still have hair, but I lost a little that day. And so on Sunday, the 16th of May, so 2 days ago, as I record this, connection dropped for 5 times, actually. Frustrating. And then we just started over. So connection outage and level checking comparison, 2 features I would like to add. So then I get an email, a bulk email, no, not to me, from the founder of Zencastr. We have a Hugo Floss account, so Hugo Floss gets an email. They're looking for a senior QA test manager, I guess, to perform QA on their product, which I assume is just the main Zencastr service, which I just talked about. So I started my career in QA. So I am not one of those people that poo-poos testers. I think they are essential. I say they as if, we who are developing software, we who test that software, at some point we should be the same person or people. But I saw that and I thought to myself immediately, like, if I had that job, I would tell them, I would tear off a piece of my mind and throw it at them. So it was a good experience to see how it works and how it doesn't, because you don't want to run into this with a guest who is taking their time. My mom and I, we talk on the phone anyway. My dad has been through an exciting year of health, so we would talk about that through the pandemic. So we're fine. We'll just pick it up at noon. That was easy. But if you've actually asked someone to take time out of their day, and then your connection goes down, and then you're spending like another hour trying to figure out why their side of the audio isn't uploading, or, oh no, just type in /recover, and you're okay, and then at the top of the browser, see where it says that kind of stuff. That is not the way to impress guests taking the time to be a part of your podcast. So right away, that is where I would show up to their first Agile meeting, because Agile is still a thing apparently, and I would, that's as a user of your product, I would like to invite a guest who is taking time out of their day to be a part of my program, audio, or now they have video, and I would like it to work without them telling everyone they know what a mess their time with me was, right? So anyway, very frustrating, and as you can tell, I've spent probably 9 of the first 10 minutes talking about it. I'm actually kind of looking at Jitsi. If you're familiar, Jitsi is a sort of an open source, open source version of Zoom or any other video conferencing application. The nice thing about Zencastr, you get for the free tier, which is nice. And again, I got to say, it mostly works, and it's a nice implementation. You get the free access to the services, basic. You can record multiple channels. Each channel is an MP3 file. It automatically puts them in your Google Drive if you want. So, like I said, 90% there. Pardon me. And then it's that last 10%. But you get the separate tracks and all that. So Jitsi, Jitsi, I think it's jitsi.org. Jitsi has an entire media server infrastructure, all open source, that you can actually build your own thing. So out of the box, it doesn't do multi-track, but somebody did a Ardor workstation, multiple channel capture. I think you open, well, in that case, it was multiple browser tabs to the Jitsi session. And then you can capture individual people, similar to what Zencastr is doing, as I described. Or I would think you could use an RTSP client, not the web browser itself. But I'm not sure. Haven't tried that. But ideally, control of your recording environment, if you're really getting into podcasting, is the way to go. And I don't know how the Zencastr, we're still, entry level, getting the podcast off the ground, so to speak. Although I think we're at 25 episodes now. So you'd think by now we're out of startup mode, but no, we're still startup. And of course, this podcast, I've found that when you have a schedule with another person, just like going to the gym or going to work, it's easier to show up on that schedule and maintain a regular publishing schedule, I guess. So I'll try to do that with this show. And in fact, I was thinking, now we're getting to the meat of the show, I suppose. It would be nice if I did a weekly that did kind of kick off the work for the week, because I do have this sprint model in mind to try to accomplish things every week. However, as a solo entrepreneur ninja, as one of my, I'll say a friend here in Vegas calls herself, Christina Aldan, entrepreneur ninja. So I'll be an entrepreneur shogun. But anyway, so if you are on your own, then it'd be nice if you could turn off all interrupts. If you're a hardware guy out there, hardware person. Sorry. If can I disable interrupts and focus all of my resources on this thing? Well, no, you cannot. There's always something, whether it's a phone call or setting up. I just set up my fintech array of services. My credit union is walking distance, which is the one good thing, but they are not good about a variety of financial services. And so I finally bit the bullet, and I have opened accounts with, for inflows, I got Bank Novo. And for outflows, I have chosen Brex. So Novo is nice because they have a lot of integrations with out of the box, which, not essential, but nice. And so far, their turnaround time on ACH transfers is like 1 day. On the weekends, basically it takes place on Monday, so predictable. My current credit union takes the full 5 days whenever they can. So getting money out of that bank takes forever, right? So if I take cash via PayPal or payments via PayPal, 1 day to get into Novo. I've already tested this. 1 day into Novo during bank days. And so if I transfer it on Friday, okay, it takes till Monday. But business days, basically 1. Getting into my bank from PayPal, also 1. Getting from my bank to credit union, to Novo, 5 days. Go figure. So Novo, they're upping their auth game. So I guess they're going to require some sort of verification of identity periodically. I guess that's nice because my credit union does not. They do have two-factor, but it's hidden away in settings and it's not on by default. Now, Brex, on the other hand, Brex starts off saying, here's your token, your secret for your Google Authenticator app, right? It'd be nice if they supported something like YubiKey. I have a couple of those too. But out of the box, Brex supports virtual credit cards, which I was using privacy.com for. Privacy.com mostly works, so that's okay. But integrated in, so I don't have to deal with Plaid, and an unlimited supply of virtual credit cards. And they send you, I've already received the physical cards, debit cards actually. So virtual debit cards that you can tie to vendors or other merchants, right? So what I was doing with privacy, after my credit union business account debit card was compromised somehow, and I don't take it outside, so I use it only for virtual services, right? So my Google Workspace, my GitHub, monthly recurring, my domain registrations, my Amazon Web Services, these are all tied to this one card, but there's a lot of different accounts, right? So every time you set up a free Amazon account, you basically have to give them a credit card number. So there you go. So privacy.com limits you to one virtual card per merchant or vendor. But if you've ever used Amazon Web Services, you know that you don't get, they don't fill in the account name or any sort of naming to differentiate bills. You actually have to look at your invoice, or if you get an email per. So you cannot simply look at your statement on the bank side, unlike Google Workspace, right? So Google Workspace will say it's a charge for, and it'll fill in some of the name of the account, which is the domain. Amazon does not do anything like that. You just get Amazon Web Services. So my goal with privacy was to set up a virtual card per account group per project. So, if you have a couple of accounts, especially if they're free, why not? You set up a test account or whatever, and you, per project, say the project is associated with the domain. That makes it very easy, but it doesn't have to be, but easy. So then you can say, well, I'll have a virtual card for a Google Workspace to pay that monthly for if a project has that. I'll have a card for the Amazon Web Services group. I have a card for GitHub, etc. And that means if one gets compromised, you know where it got compromised. And you don't have to go through and reset, spend all afternoon resetting all the recurring charge payments and whatnot. And at some point, if you get to the point where you got Amazon Web Services traffic and deployments that are crazy and all that, you can go with a bank direct payment, like an invoice, PO, ACH transfers, and all that. That's fine. But just to start up your account, you use a card. So if you've done that before, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, it's just you're subscribing to a service. They want a card up front, even if it's going to be no charge every month. They're supposed to give you, they're supposed to have a way to charge you if you use the service, and they do send a verification charge, which they just don't settle, right? So there's like a $1 auth that doesn't get captured, and it's not settled. There you go. So you need a card for the authorization. So you'll see the $1, and then it goes away after a couple days. You're done. So privacy.com only enables the one Amazon Web Services virtual card. And so while I did get to split it up by vendor, Google, Amazon, GitHub, I was not able to make it more granular, which would have been nice. So Brex, apparently, they weren't able to answer me with an affirmative yes, but they did say there's no limit to the number of vendor cards, and there's nothing that they could find that says you cannot do what I'm suggesting. And so it's nice if your support people understand the product better, but I will test it this week as one of my non-sprint. When I'm not sprinting, I will do the administrative work, continuing the adventure in fintech. But anyway, so far I'm happy with this setup. So Stripe, PayPal, my credit union attached to the Novo for inflows. Novo doesn't take Zella, but my credit union does. So, okay, if I want to take Zella, Cash App, things like this. But for Stripe, which will be the recurring subscription, if I have subscribers to my mobile vending platform, or if I have, there are a few projects I'll talk about over the course of these episodes into the future. But if I have subscribers paid via Stripe, most likely directly into Novo, then Novo to Brex for paying recurring service fees and accounts payable, basically. So accounts receivable, accounts payable, if you're into accounting, seems to work. So far so good. And I mentioned that Brex gives you the TOTP secret. They give you some paper keys, HOTP keys for backup, and then you are up and running. And I actually sent support email to Novo and said, hey, if you're going to be adding this, like we're going to confirm your identity every month, email and phone, whatever. I said, you should explore this. Brex got it pretty right, pretty correct. And they're using actual tokens, not sending you an SMS message with an OTP key, or OTP value. Right, so that's old. I don't know. Even Amazon does this. Check your phone number for come on. Phone cloning is becoming more. It's going from 0% to 0.1%. Yeah, but still, we should get out of this mindset of like, oh, of course, a text message. That's the end all and be all. No. So there you go. FinTech, Zencaster. What else? What other fun has there been? I think I've mentioned Casa Nunzia. So several years ago, I was when I worked at Intel. I went to the what was the ordering of this? I went to Arduino offices, Officine Arduino in Torino, Italy. I spent 13 days right around Thanksgiving. Fun fact, I chose to go there around Thanksgiving because it's an American holiday, obviously, and so they would not be celebrating it in Italy. But also I knew that my manager and my other colleagues would say, why are you going there during Thanksgiving? Because they would have plans. So it gave me an opportunity to go and have some time with the Arduino team, which was an external vendor for us at the time, and hang out, get to know them and all that without my manager, because we ended up having a little summit of sorts to talk about a product that would eventually be called the Arduino 101, which was the star from Intel's perspective of the America's Greatest Maker show and all that. So this was a kickoff meeting for that project. And also, strangely enough, no one from Intel had ever really hung out at the Arduino offices. So it was a time to hang. So we did. So while I was there, we got to check out what was at the time the foundation of Casa Jasmina, the hackable apartment, and Massimo Banzi, sort of the face of Arduino, had mentioned this hackable apartment several times, and so we were seeing it. The idea they had was you can book it on Airbnb, you could stay in this hackable apartment, and you can work on projects in a living space, right? So think smart home. So it was an interesting idea. So we get to see it. Lorenzo, the project manager, opens the door, which was basically a door off of one of their meeting rooms. Like, oh, you're in the Arduino offices are in kind of the industrial area of Torino, which is where Fiat used to be manufactured. I don't know if they still are, but this particular warehouse building, it had been converted into like a co-working space and an industrial commercial area. So this hackable apartment was actually not in a apartment building. It was in this industrial work area, kind of a warehouse district. But you could actually, so like in one of the workspace areas, they had a mechanical arm, I think that's what that was. Anyway, so like a maker space with a lot of space. And then upstairs were the Arduino offices, actually, well, they were downstairs, and upstairs were the meeting room and some of the work areas and office space. You go off there into what would become the Casa Jasmina hackable apartment. And I will simply say that my comment to Lorenzo when we first walked in the door off that meeting room was, hey, this reminds me of Fight Club. And Lorenzo started like, hey, Ben, that's not nice. And I said, I'm just the beginning. So it was kind of very rough. It was a very rough area. It somehow was, it looked like the inside of a home, but it looked like after a flood and maybe after a small skirmish. So it was not very pretty. But anyway, they converted it. They remodel and renovate and whatever they did to make it into an actual living space, and that was fine. So to me, hackable apartment, that really resonated with me. And if you've ever used Hue lighting from Philips or similar, setting up your smart home, it's very tricky. So what was bubbling through my mind ever since that moment was, man, it'd be nice if some of these people that develop the app on your phone, I hate that word app, the thing on your phone that controls your lights, or even just setting up the lights, it'd be nice if those people would get out of their cubicles and actually live with the product when they're developing it. So yeah, hackable apartment right away, like, oh, that makes sense. And then fast forward a little bit to, I think it might have been, so this was November, I think it was in January, so 2 months later, less than 2 months later, Intel has their typical booth at CES, and because I worked for Intel at the time and I do live in Vegas, they're like, oh yeah, you can just work in the booth, I guess, if you want, because I live here. They didn't have to book me a room, they didn't have to do all that stuff, so I got a free pass to get in, a ticket. And I was talking to the Intel dress was at the show. I was talking to the software person, one of them anyway, who had developed the back end, I guess, of the Intel dress using Intel Edison and whatever else was added on there. And the dress would use skin temperature and other biosensors, heart rate probably. I don't know if it was using any sort of biofeedback, any EEG sensors. Those are certainly available, but I think it was purely measuring stress, and it would deploy these little spider legs. So it had little motors, actuators on it. So the software would measure your stress level and deploy defensive mechanisms if it sensed that you were feeling threatened. A cool idea. So Carly, the software developer, also an Intel employee, we were next to each other at our stations at the booth talking about products, and so between tire kickers visiting, hey, what is this, kind of thing, we were talking about the dress and the coat. She said, yeah, actually I think anxiety is an interesting thing to tackle with technology and all that. So I said, it'd be cool if you're in a home, your residence, your place of what you would hope would be safety, security, and all that. It'd be nice if your home could do what the Intel dress is doing. That is, kind of keep track of you, your family, and kind of look out for you. And at some point I had been, it was at the First Build hackathon in Louisville, Kentucky. GE, before Haier bought GE Appliances, GE was running this place. It's right next to the University of Kentucky in Louisville. I think it's U of K. I don't know if it's Kentucky University. My apologies. But they had a connected appliances that, they're doing the smart kitchen stuff. So I think I had talked about this when I was at the hackathon. I said it'd be cool if your refrigerator could tell you if you have spoiled food in there. So if you expand on the Intel dress idea, if you're feeling stressed, it deploys defenses. If your home would actually say, hey, why is there food that's been sitting in the refrigerator for a long time? Pardon me. Why is the kitchen not being used? Why is your body weight low? Okay, decreasing. Why have you not been turning on the lights? Why have you not left the house? That kind of thing. So you could basically have the home, and not this would be fairly invasive, I suppose. Your home could be looking out for you, and even for just the normal, everyday, typical 80% of the population, just doing your thing. Everybody can feel down. Everybody can feel depressed, frustrated. You get an email from work that you're getting laid off, or a loved one decides that they don't want to be a loved one anymore and they depart, or whatever it is. So the home, and certainly if there's multiple residents, sometimes somebody doesn't even tell their other family members or the other people they're living with, housemates, roommates, whatever. So the house is sort of looking out for its occupants. That's the notion. And so for the 80%, the casual population that doesn't have any particular special needs that they would identify, okay, that's interesting. And so you get yourself a smart speaker from Google, Google, Facebook, or Amazon. You get your camera on the front door to monitor your neighbors and report back to whoever. You get your quantified self, so you're measuring your heart rate and your all these little individual sensors that come together in your Google Fit or Apple Health, or whatever it is. There's this disparate set of tools, and interesting. But now imagine you're in that 20%, and I'm just throwing these numbers around. I don't know if it's really 20%, but you are actually depressed. You are actually suffering from PTSD or from agoraphobia, and those are, so that's, say, a slice of that 20%. Suppose you are disabled somehow. You are some sort of a injury has left you unable to use something, a limbs, voice, eyes, whatever. Or maybe you have limitations that you were, I'm trying to be careful here because I'm not intending to be insulting or diminish anybody. That's the whole point of this. Anyway, so some chunk of the population cannot use a smart speaker, or maybe doesn't use lights, or doesn't have the same needs or typical day as the 80%. So what you end up with is products that are designed for people who want them. That's fine. That's how commerce works. But then there's a chunk of the population who needs products to assistive technologies, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a thing, a tangible device. Maybe it's a piece of software. Maybe it's a service online. Maybe it connects various other pieces of software or other devices. Maybe it's a piece of furniture, a mirror. Who knows? It could be anything, and that's part of the deal also. So if you can somehow convince a company of one, a company of thousands, to say, hey, what if you took this smart speaker and you made it work for and with people who cannot speak as well as that 80%? And I'm not talking an accent. I'm talking about an affectation, which could be the result of an injury or some other special circumstance. You make that, and the example, the obvious low-hanging fruit example is Dr. Stephen Hawking. Through his life, his ability to speak was affected. And so at some point, Intel developed this hardware and software package that could process his speech patterns and turn them into text. And so you end up with this speech recognition workflow designed for him. So what if smart speakers were designed with that sort of customer in mind, with that sort of special need, where they cannot form words correctly, or they cannot make sounds that are completely audible in the 80% range of population so that they can be turned into words, right? So the phonemes, maybe a couple of them are missing and they can't say certain sounds or make certain sounds. So that's just one example. One of my favorites is Google Goggles on the phone. Was the precursor, kind of the here, try this application for Android that was the precursor to Google Glass. And as a test one day, I pointed my camera at some crinkled up money in a non-ideally lit situation. Pardon me. And Google Goggles properly identified my $5 and $10 bills or whatever it was. And if you know anything about American money compared to money from other countries, American money is, I believe, the only, or certainly one of the few, and one of the more popular of the few, where all the bills are the same size. So they don't differentiate on size and mostly texture. Perhaps it's possible because of the raised, if you have a new bill, you could probably tell the difference between, Franklin and Grant, Jackson, Hamilton, Lincoln, Washington. Make sure people around you could do that. So you end up with the possibility that older bills, somebody may give you a 1 and tell you it's a 5. And if you are vision impaired, you have to trust people, which is tricky. So to me, Google Glass's application space was really not about face identification or, okay, those are gee whiz. The people that need it are the ones who have a vision impairment where this could tell you things like that's a $5 bill, that milk is going to expire, that bottle of medication says this, or here's the one I just started pondering the other day. Can I put some pills on a neutral background, white, black, some say a tray or a small space where I could dump out some pills and then take a picture and identify which pills are which, so that not only the vision impaired person, but possibly a caregiver could, without the bottles available, identify pills without having to refer to a PDR or, check each number. So could an application using a camera identify medications? Things like this. So the missing ingredient is co-creation, in my opinion, and putting together an interoperable collection of services, applications, methodologies, notions, so that people say, oh, yes, this product works for people with these assistive technology needs or just general assistance needs. And here's how we can work with people to make sure that's the case. And I found this really great article. I think it was from 2017 in the outline. And it was a company that it was called iBot. They made a wheelchair that could get up on two wheels, and could negotiate different terrain. I think it could climb stairs. And yes, the Segway guy, Cayman, he had a wheelchair that could do something similar. So yeah, the iBot, cool wheelchair, because I don't use a wheelchair. But it turns out that no one who needed a wheelchair could use this thing either, because they had designed it in isolation. Hey, here's this cool wheelchair, and people who could have benefited from cool wheelchair effort, design, implementation, said, that doesn't work for us though. So when you disconnect your customers, and this happens all the time, you develop something without asking your customers, not only do you need this, but how are we doing along the way? And then you release a very expensive wheelchair that nobody can use. So just imagine that happening all the time, but just not with much fanfare. And as a user of products, I would consider myself pretty much in the 80%. I might casually say, well, that looks cool. Seems like it should work. But if you actually pay attention, you might say, well, what about somebody who can't, who needs, maybe that's where user stories come into play in a more practical way, right? As a user of a wheelchair, I need, a seat of a certain type, a certain width, a certain weight. Because of the way my entire life is organized, a wheelchair of this type needs to be able to fit through a doorway, needs to be able to get into a vehicle, go up a ramp. So if you've never asked the people that need these things how they work or how they use them even, you might design something like the iBot where you end up with a trophy of failure. Trophy to failure. Anyway, so the Casa Nunzi project aims at turning co-creation and the hackable apartment notion, right? So the idea was, how could you take this Intel Dress effort and the Casa Jasmina project, and you take those ideas, hey, what if your home was taking measurements of some sort of its occupants, looking out for them, and taking actions if needed, whatever those might be, to care for their safety, security, well-being. How can we develop those things in such a way that the people developing them and the people that will use them will be able to, as we used to say at Palm, live on them? You live on a phone, right? You put the development Palm Pre in Palm Pilot too. Why not? Put the Pre in your pocket, which we used to do. So we used to carry the phone with us daily. And Ruby, we'd get Ruby bugs every morning because every morning he'd be on the Caltrain coming from San Francisco down to Sunnyvale, where Palm was. And he would use the phone every day. So we had a repeatable set of cell towers, behavior. He's checking the same email. So that was one type of user who's using the device in the same way every day, in the same corridor of connectivity. Very useful. And this is the CEO of the company taking a super active interest in the product. So very interesting. Now take the iBot target audience, involve them in the design of the product. Take actual vision impaired users, involve them in the development of the Google Glass product. Take actual speech affected users, involve them in the development of the algorithms used to turn speech into text for a smart speaker or a phone even. Do this in a structured way, maintain privacy, maintain the dignity of your users, right? But also make it useful so that the people that are using your products during development in the co-creation model are honored by your attention. That is, if everybody trying out your vision product says, hey, it really works great, except it doesn't recognize medications. And if you ignore them, then the value of the co-creation model evaporates almost immediately. So you take all of this input and you work with these people who are basically making your product better for the people that need your product, and you value their contributions and you make sure that they know that. So that's another aspect of this that we'll get to at some point. But anyway, so that's the Casa Nunzia project in a nutshell. It will probably be a Casa Nunzia Foundation. We're forming a startup board now to get board of directors, board of governance. We'll work through all the documents. We'll file our 1023 to get a 501c3 determination. will be an actual charity, and work groups probably to tackle certain issues. And a year ago, before the pandemic, I had a second conversation at a second annual, for me, kitchen and bath industry show here in Vegas. One of the advantages of living in Vegas, everybody ends up here eventually. So I was at this show, met with the Living in Place Institute. Yeah. They were having another gathering for the second year that I was able to attend. And there I spoke with Jason from the chief of specially adapted housing at the Veterans Administration. So a good conversation, and one where he recognized immediately, because he has to deal with not specially adapted devices and technologies and workflows and interactions. So making off-the-shelf or unfamiliar connect with people who need these technologies in the Veteran Administration sphere is always a challenge. So he was there talking to builders and people that were going through the Living in Place Institute's program. Here's a particular version or take on they are living in place. It used to be called the aging in place. So these are people that are not growing older and having a hip or a arthritis, joint, hand joints problem, or these are people that have had these issues thrust upon them. And so they have to somehow come up with a way to live life. And the SAH part of the VA that Jason's in charge of is they're trying to put this together to make it possible for veterans to have a more comfortable life, right? So simple. So when I described the Casanensia agenda, he was completely on board, I suppose you could say. Like, yes, I see the value. He totally got it. So I'm encouraged by that. There's a segment of the population that understands this because they work with this every day. There are people in my field, the tech side of the world, that they develop products in a vacuum in their cubicle. They attend meetings with people that are similarly isolated from their users, and you end up with products that don't work. And they're no more true than it was at Intel for our maker products, because there again, when you have a company that designs products for for Dell, hey, our customers are Dell, Apple, LG, Acer, whatever the top 5 were at the time. They're talking how many millions of parts you're going to buy. When you're trying to work with makers, you're just going to buy one. You don't necessarily understand that entire relationship. And since my job was to go out and actually work with our users, right? I was going to maker fairs and hackathons, and I was engaging with the academic and our partner in this endeavor, Arduino, right? Nobody from Intel had actually ever visited them during the relationship up until this point. So when you don't make that leap across the gap to meet your users where they are, you develop and deliver products with poor documentation, bad user experience, that don't do certain things, and you literally have people on the product side, on the development side, the tech side, saying things like, why would someone want to do that? Well, they do. So there's a quote somewhere about ours is not the reason why, right? So something like that. Not quite as grave usually, but hey, why don't we make something that people can use, that meets their needs, not that sounds cool in your cubicle. It looks nice on a whiteboard. So there you go, Casanensia. So now we're coming to the end of this episode. I try to keep them at an hour. It's just me talking. Imagine if we had a guest, which would be nice at some point. So I noticed that Clubhouse is finally rolling out their Android version of their tool, which I would say Clubhouse is a tool, is a fine perspective. I think Clubhouse kind of fell out of favor because who cares? Everybody, just like Snapchat and stories, ephemeral and ethereal stories, take your pick. Everybody has stories. Now everybody will have a drop-in audio podcast. I think Reddit was doing it. Facebook is doing it. Twitter is doing it. I switched over from normal texting to Telegram as my sort of daily driver. I actually use Telegram Signal and Element for different reasons and different conversations. But Telegram rolled out their drop-in voice chat podcast recording service. So you can create a channel that's visible. I don't know if you heard that. That was my collection of smart speakers telling me something. So Telegram is cool. It'd be possible to do a drop-in QuogglingSand episodes. Chat about what you're doing, which would be totally fine, which I think is part of my agenda. Maybe it will be Telegram, maybe it will be Jitsi, maybe it will be Zencaster. I don't know. I don't know how many people are listening to this, so that's one challenge. Then there's the whole website per show that I have to get on. This is my sprint topic, was deploying sites, which is another thing that got interrupted. Thrashing on interrupts. You interrupt, and then you have priority inversion. Suddenly 10 things that you don't need to do all have to be done when the one important thing is held off. So that's fun. But anyway, so drop-in audio podcasting, and then Casa Nunzia itself will almost certainly need something like a podcast or a stream or multiples of each as we start engaging companies and our co-creative users and the process, and as we make progress. And there are other projects I'm working on. So there's no shortage of things to do. And that's why I like to talk about it with at least me and my microphone. I don't have two turntables, but I do have a microphone. Let me know if you got that one. I've been jumping on the newsletter bandwagon. I think a newsletter style is a little bit better than show notes as a enclosure, description enclosure for a RSS, whatever. I'm not a fan of RSS anymore. RSS solves a problem that we don't have anymore, so I think there are better ways that I'll probably talk about at some point. But a show notes, a newsletter to go around the limitations of RSS enclosure, content. So the description of this show if you're listening to the show on a podcast player of some sort, which I guess you are, it should say, hey, if you want to, click on here to visit QuogglingSand.substack.com. And that's where the show notes will appear. And you can get an email and listen or subscribe to an RSS feed. And ultimately, my goal down the road is to enable more of these ways that people use and not habitually send people to Facebook or, you got to use this, you got to use that. You like email? You like to read on a website? You like to be notified via that email? Do you want to just go to the website whenever? You get a bookmark? You want to get it in your RSS podcatcher? You want to find it on social media? You want it in Twitter? Whatever. There should be multiple ways to reach people who are interested in things. So, and that's a whole nother topic, another project. I got projects. So I will end, as I'm trying to do, with a story from my own history. So I guess it'll be off topic. I probably have co-creation stories. But in this case, it will be when I worked at Apple. I worked at Apple in Mariani 1, which was the first Apple office address. And it was the home of eWorld, eventually, in the first floor. And Apple Quality, which was my second normal job, my third actual job outside when I graduated from college. I worked at Supermac, got laid off. Temporary, like 2-week gig working at Storm Technologies on a graphic editor, kind of a nothing like Photoshop, but that sort of idea, right? Editing photos. Very simple. Took advantage of DSPs, if I remember correctly, if you had a Thunder card from Supermac, hence the relationship. So I got referred by my buddy Andrew Eisner from Supermac. Hey, Dad, they could use you over at Storm. So pre-release, final testing. Like I said, I've done QA. I think it's something that should be respected more than it is. Anyway, so then I started working at Apple in Apple quality. And the first thing I was working on, I think back then I was making $20 an hour. Big money. First thing was the Power Macintosh upgrade card. And so this was a card that you could drop into certain 68K Macs and it would override the processor and give you PowerPC 601 hardware. And you could then use the System 7 for PowerPC. Very exciting. I think it was System 7. I think it was System 7. Capone. And so I learned all about Apple. I had been an Apple fanboy for many years. Sometime I'll tell you the story of when I wrote Steve Jobs a letter. I think I was 10 years old. And I got a response. Probably not from Steve Jobs, but I did get a response. I think it was probably a cordial response, so it probably was not from Steve Jobs. Anyway, I was working in Apple quality in the Power Macintosh upgrade card group, which was a sort of an offshoot of the PowerPC group. I worked with Linda Adams, although not directly. I reported to Ray Ockel. I don't know whatever happened to Ray. He was a very nice guy. But a lot of colleagues, very very fun group, very interesting. It was an interesting time, and the thing that was actually very interesting was that this eclectic group of various backgrounds. I was a young engineer just out of college. We had English majors. We had well, anyway, anybody. They were hiring anybody who was a user of computers because the entire process was about running emulated applications, and we're changing a processor out from under you. How's that going to go? So for the chaos, it was actually valuable, I think. Anyway, so in my year, I think I had just been laid off, so I took this job, and then I think it was 1 year. You can only work there for 18 months as a contractor. So along the way, I tried to interview for actual full-time jobs at Apple, which would have been nice for my, up until then, my adoration for Apple would have been, oh, I'm an Apple employee now. How cool is that? After all these years, my first computer was an Apple IIe. After how many years of playing with Apple II Pluses and hoping to get a computer someday. So yeah, I was all into the 6502. And so getting a job at Apple would have been cool. I interviewed for a few groups, including the Power Macintosh upgrade card group. And it was a very all-day interview, very interesting. They were very nice. I didn't have any experience, which was, you could see that on my resume. But, you know, at the time I was like, well, why don't you just tell me that? But actually the value of the interview process was something that was lost on me at the time, but which ultimately was the take home, right? Like, oh, actually that was an interesting interview process. I did learn from that. But one of the groups I interviewed in was the desktop group. The Apple organization structure was, who knows, total chaos. But I interviewed in the desktop group. Somebody named Buddy, I think his name was Buddy, I can't remember. He had a nice group, nice gathering of people, except for one person. I don't remember her name, but she immediately assumed I was adversarial in our interview. So that was like, what? Which was also a good learning experience. Like, what happens when your interview goes off the rails when this in this case, one of the 5 people or so completely misunderstand something or take something the wrong way, and you're left going like, what? Wait, what just happened? How do I recover from that? So I'm not saying I did, but it was a good experience either way. One of the people I spoke to at some point in one of these groups was Gary Davidian. Any Apple fans out there, maybe you might know, Gary Davidian wrote the first Apple emulator that would enable you to run 68K Macs, use your 68K Mac software on your PowerPC computer. So it was not just in time, compiler or anything. It was literally a per instruction emulator. It would turn a 68K instruction into PowerPC instructions and step through them. Reasonable performance, not great, but hey, it launched the PowerPC Mac. So Gary Davidian, very nice guy. We had a brief interview, our 30 minutes or whatever. At the end, he said, "Oh, I'd hire you." So that was nice. Didn't get hired. Eventually left Apple. I'll probably do that a lot. And I think after Apple, I worked at UMax. No, after Apple, I worked at SCM Microsystems. Then I went on to UMax. And at UMax, I was working on our PowerPC platform, which was Chirp, Prep, PowerPC platform. So Common Hardware Reference Platform, PowerPC Reference Platform, and then eventually it was named the PowerPC platform. It was going to be, hey, you can boot Linux, Solaris PowerPC, Windows PowerPC, or Mac OS PowerPC on the same hardware. Novel idea. So from my time at Netscape, having used all these operating systems in one way or another, my interest in Linux and open platforms in general, my time at Apple, they were like, yeah, be our person in charge of making sure that can all happen. And I eventually fell into, oh, wait, I can do assembly language in PowerPC. So I was on the bring up team for our Basecamp chipset development board. That was completely educational. One of my favorite jobs, actually. But somewhere in there, because it was a small company, UMax, we had a upgradable platform using ZIF sockets, and I think it was the Pentium. Well, basically, it was a Pentium ZIF socket, zero insertion force, the little white sockets with the little lever. So if you ever upgraded your Intel processor, maybe you were going from Pentium to K6, you could pull one out, put one in, you're all good. So UMax had these upgradable processors that you could drop in a new processor into your UMax computer that you bought when Apple enabled the clone program, and you could upgrade your processor. Very nice. Instead of buying a whole new computer. So we had the Arthur processors were coming out. These were 603E PowerPCs. 603s were mobile oriented, but those were the first ones that came out with the backside cache, which is now commonplace. Everything has this. But at the time, it was kind of a game changer, and if you could enable cache memory on our upgrade parts, you would have this great massive performance increase. Like wow! And we could do it in the lab. That was easy. We turn on the caches. The memory. The parameters you have to set. You drop in open firmware. I had a couple of fourth words that could go through and set up the backside cache as appropriate, and you're up and running. And we could do benchmarks and make sure it functioned, all that stuff. That was great. In order to ship the product, we had to pass through Apple quality certification. Was it Apple? Not Apple quality certification, but it was Apple compliance? I can't remember. So you'd bring your whole computer down there and they would run it through a bunch of tests and make sure it worked. So we had to have the system running when you powered it up like a normal user. And enabling that backside cache was not something you could do very easily because it had to be done in a supervisor mode in the processor. So you had to execute supervisor level instructions to change the registers to enable and to size the memory, configure the memory controller for the backside cache, and then enable the caching, right? Not very involved, but you can only do it in supervisor mode. And unfortunately, when you are using a Macintosh, you are not in supervisor mode for PowerPC. At the time, you would be at best in supervisor mode for the 68K, but basically you're in user mode, which is by design. The operating system is in supervisor mode. The applications are in user mode. Everybody's happy. So my task was, how can we enable the backside cache with our upgrade card dropped into our existing certified Apple clone so that it will continue to be a certified product with the upgrade? So I think I had a week, like 5 days, to figure this out. And it turns out that Apple MaxBug was designed for PowerPC to hide the the instruction pathways that would accomplish what I needed. So at some point I was checking with a logic analyzer because we had all this. Luckily, we had everything set up to do this. This is probably not the best way to do this, but it was certainly usable. I set up our logic analyzer to trace through instructions. So I could watch the fetches, I could watch the jumps, all that. And I could see where it was jumping into memory during certain things, right? So that's too distant a memory to remember exactly, but it was essentially how is it doing certain things at boot up time. So this was a lot of time spent, and I was a little tired. But I did eventually figure out that where it was jumping into the Mac ROM and where it was jumping into other places when it was executing PowerPC supervisor instructions, right? And it turns out, and this was the aha moment that kind of made me laugh, but it obviously harkened back to that interview I mentioned. But it turns out when you're running 68K instructions, back in this, obviously not today, but your 68K init code, so the little icons that would appear on your Mac when you were booting up, remember those days? If you loaded two 68K registers with the word Gary and his birthday, so two 32-bit values, and then you set up a trap handler and you execute an exception on the 68K side that would get trapped on the PowerPC side, the trap handler that would get called, yours, would be running in or would jump to code that could then be running in supervisor mode. So there you go. Piece of cake. So I already had the code running to size and configure and enable the backside cache. I just had to figure out how to run it in production. After 3 days of nonstop hackery, I came up with this thing that worked, and we were able to qualify our hardware with properly configured and running backside caches on our 603E upgrade card. And that was it. So those were the days. That was actual, like, roll up the sleeves and spend all your time in a lab and make something work using all of your engineering skills, your, like, everything you've learned, everything you need to learn, the tools that are available, what you can come up with that you don't have, all that. So those were fun times. And I have plenty of stories along those lines, although that's one of my favorites because it was kind of random. Kind of a random, just, you know, guys, kind of like a mystery game, like a Zork adventure, right? Like, type in who is the developer? What's it? Gary. Okay, when is Gary's birthday? But just weird, just a strange thing. But there you go. My time at Apple, and then my time at UMax. And here we are today. So thank you for listening. I am going to set up a newsletter today when I post this so that QuogglingSand podcast and QuogglingSand newsletter will coexist. And then maybe that will be interesting to you, and you can subscribe. I got to up my social media game to promote I have Twitter for QuogglingSand. Oh, by the way, QuogglingSand on Twitter got suspended. It has zero followers, zero following, zero tweets. I literally set it up and then I kind of set it aside because it interrupts, and it got suspended. And I sent an email, what do you do if you get suspended? And I said, hey, I have nothing. What policy could I have violated to get suspended? And even though it says you'll hear back in 1 or 2 days or something, it was like 10 minutes later, unsuspended. So the only thing I can think of is that because it starts with a Q in the world of QAnon, that there was some sort of, you got to be suspended because, so very strange. This is yet another reason that I'm kind of backing away from social media platforms. Like, well, I don't want to deal with all that. However, it's another way to get the word out. There are some people that will want to subscribe to the Twitter feed for this podcast, and both of you should be able to do that. So yeah, the Twitter game, basically getting the word out, engagement, and then QuogglingSand website on which to blog about certain things. And of course, those will all point to things like Casa Ninja and everything else. So this has been 1 hour and 11 minutes so far, and some seconds. So I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to thank you again and again. I'm going to ask that you share this if you like. I'm going to ask that you like this if you share. Check out the newsletter, QuogglingSand.substack.com. Eventually website, eventually Twitter and all the other social media fun. Consider being a guest. We can talk about what you're working on. We can bounce ideas around. We can palaver. And if you are interested in Casa Ninja, we can talk about that. Or you can keep listening, and I'm sure I'll mention it again. Finally, I'm not doing this for money, but you are always welcome to drop me a couple of bucks for a coffee. buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. It is my very laid-back attempt at monetizing for the sake of getting some of these things up and running. It would serve $5, I think, is one of the. I got to figure out how to adjust the minimum cutoff. But $5. I do drink a lot of coffee. I'm drinking coffee right now. Some wicked Italian. So I have a variety of beans and I have a variety of methods. And this is getting bitter. It's cold. So buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. If you are interested in supporting, I have a bunch of projects there that will grow. So that's sort of my self-promotion / monetization portal experiment. And again, not doing this for to make a living, but hey, if you're interested in what I'm working on, it's all pooled together. So this is not buy me a coffee in exchange for QuogglingSand. It's more, there's a whole list of things there, and that list will be growing. You're kind of just throwing in on the whole deal if you want. If not, that's fine too. But if more people listen and would like to participate, like I mentioned, the Telegram idea, some chat, try to do live stream and chat. I'm not a huge fan of the YouTube super chat thing, but there's a place for that somewhere, perhaps. And on that note, I will leave you. Thank you again and again and again. Ciao for now.